because you can use whatever you like.
Okay, how many children were in your family? Your own family when you were younger?
7.
And where were you in it?
6.
6. And what was your date of birth? What is your date of birth?
1st of April 1929.
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day. I've been hiding it all my life now, you know my secret.
Right. And your parents, were they, what was their occupation?
Farmer.
Right.
Farmer and farm wife.
Right. And can you remember, Anne, when you went to school, what it was like? What age you were?
I was 5. 2 teacher school, all Irish. We walked, I suppose, about a mile and a half around the road, or you could go across the fields and run, and it was shorter. And there was a lady teacher, gentleman teacher. She had up to 2nd class. And I don't ever remember, can't remember junior infants and senior infants. I think it was just infants and 1st and 2nd, you know. But then it being the 2 teacher school, sure, they'd be mixed up anyway.
Right.
And it was a lot of rote learning, and it was through Irish, and all our tables through Irish. And we had a lot of brilliant tables, and you were just sent off there with your class around the board, and you were pointing to it, and you were learning those again, 3 those, don't count, those 3 good.
And did you have Irish at home before you went to school? Was that?
Not really. My father loved Irish, and he used to talk a bit of Irish to us. And you know, I came in that part of the family when they'd be doing Irish at school too. But my mother never had Irish. My father had Irish because orally, but he wasn't able to write it.
Right.
Because it wasn't in their day in schools. You know, schools weren't teaching Irish. But he said that he learned it as a youngster because they would be in around in the cool of the night, and if they had any big scandals, or indeed anything military or anything like that to talk about, they talked in Irish so that the youngsters wouldn't understand what they were saying, and they gradually picked it up and went out of their way a bit to learn it, you know. So he had all Irish. My mother didn't have Irish except a few little phrases.
So it must have been very difficult when you went initially to school to...
Never noticed it.
Really?
When I say that it was an all-Irish school, I don't mean that they were rigid and spoke Irish to you all the time, you know. But all your schooling was through Irish, except for English.
Right.
All your maths and everything else that you did, you know. And of course that didn't interfere with you for the first infants first, you know, because they were the basic subjects we were doing anyway.
Right. And what were facilities like in the school, like toilets? Were they
outdoor dry toilet with that? There was a stream at the back, I think, you know, that it sort of all that I remember something like that, that sort of the pit went down into a big stream or something. That was it. And I remember we had writing in slates when I was at school, in chalk and slates thing. And I remember the little counting beads. I'd say that was probably the only thing we had for counting age, you know,
right.
The little strings on the abacus, really it was, I think. And we had, you know, a whole lot of sugar bags. The teacher was marvellous, and she used to break up, you know, at that time, because we lived in the country, and you'd get a half stone of sugar or whatever it was. Shopping was done in bulk, I suppose, and it came in black bags,
right.
Thick, cardy kind of bags, because we collected these with the teacher. She opened them up, and she put in chalk the lessons that we had to learn, the things, poetry by heart, tables, and all these sort of things, and they were put up on the wall, and we were round them and we learned them by heart. And they were all the aids we had now.
She would write on chalk
on these
sacks,
these black. They were
Yeah,
black
no.
bags. You know, the black sort of thick paper,
Right.
between paper and cardboard. You know, but they had to be sturdy to hold
Right.
sugars. You know, and they were right. Black being the right colour. She could also do it in brown, but she preferred black.
Showed up the writing
That's
letter.
all we ever had, and never. I don't believe she had coloured chalk even. You know.
Right.
The slates we had copies, and of course handwriting was frightfully important. We were introduced to in first class. I think we were introduced to the red and blue lines.
And you had the fountain or the ink.
We
Pen, the
had
nibbling ink.
pencil then.
Right.
You weren't introduced to the ink until you got to second class. It was a big step in your life.
You'd really arrived when you got there.
Yes. And they were awfully strict. Oh, we used to be terrified of blotting them, you know.
Yeah. And did they teach music or Irish dancing in
Yes,
school?
they taught music. I don't remember having dancing, although I do remember dancing because we had it as an extra. I think that the dancing teacher came and did steps or something after school, and you paid sixpence or whatever it was, you know.
Right.
And he came maybe one evening a week or something for a certain length of time, because I remember going to those classes, you know.
Right.
And with music, one teacher had music, but all we ever did was singing.
Right.
And you know, he sort of had a tuning fork, and he was able to sing. He had the do re mi, the sol fa, and that was all.
And was there ever anybody in your class that you felt, you know, very sorry for, or any particular child that you felt maybe wasn't treated
Sorry for.
properly, or?
I never remember any tremendous cruelty, but they were cruel to teachers, were cruel to everyone.
Right.
I mean, the system was cruel if you liked to, but you accepted that because, after all, wasn't home cruel too. I mean, there was the big discipline and a slap. I mean, it was accepted that you got a slap. I never saw anyone very badly treated, you know. Except I knew of children, of one child that I thought was very badly treated at home by his father. And I don't know how we were all aware of it. I think maybe because the male teacher in the school knew about it, who was a little bit sympathetic or something.
And you sensed that from the teacher?
And well, with rumours about this and that, you know, because of any small neighbourhood, you know about it, you know. I don't ever remember tremendous cruelty now in the school. There's none of the sort of awful bashing that you hear about nowadays that went on and indeed did go on, you know. You were at the mercy of that one teacher for all your school life, you know.
And was there one teacher in particular that you felt, you know, you really liked, or?
Well, there was a female and a male teacher.
Yeah.
The male teacher took
So
from
you
third
didn't
up
have
to
much
sixth. And of course we liked the female teacher better. There was, because I suppose there was a sort of homeliness and we being the girls, I suppose, in the school, and she always took the sewing, or that we had sewing and knitting as well, you know. So we'd have that 2 evenings a week. And I suppose we liked her better. If you had anything to talk about or to confide or anything, you confide in her, you know.
And what did the boys do when you were doing the sewing and the knitting?
Gosh, I wonder what they did.
Did they do it?
Oh, they did something. He took, you see, all of the classes. While the girls were for sewing, that's how they managed it. You know, the girls would have the sewing 2 evenings a week or whatever number of hours, I suppose, which didn't concern us at the time, but whatever number of hours were laid out. And the little ones were there, and I think it was a sort of entertainment hour for them while the sewing was going on, and that they sang songs and they told stories and things, you know. It was all very educational too for them.
Sounds very
particularly
as
with
well.
particularly with older and younger people, boys mixing, you know, and sitting in desks and being supervised and sort of being able to have this banter.
Can you remember, were the two classrooms completely separate, say the senior from the junior?
They were, yes.
And how
There was
many?
a partition.
Right. And did that partition ever, was it ever taken back?
And it seemed to be a fixture there, doesn't it? I don't think that you could ever have. Because we had the stations came to the school, you see, twice a year or whatever it was, you know.
This was a regular thing?
It was.
So
I mean, for a district, you know how they,
Yeah.
in the country, they had stations coming up to Easter, coming up to Christmas, I think. Not very, a bit vague on that. But different kind of townlands for different areas, and of course the townlands that served the school, the stations were served in the school. Now in many parishes around Ireland, I think there were stations, and maybe still are, is in places, stations held in houses. But in my time, my childhood, I don't remember ever in the house, it was in the schools, you know.
And did the local people come into the school for the station, or was this just for the school children?
Oh gosh, the school children were in stations for all the local people.
Oh, right.
Came and they paid their dues, and they had mass and they had confession, and there was breakfast with the priest, and the neighbours came in to help with that.
And this was all took place in the school?
Yes, on a Saturday morning.
Right.
School had to be cleaned and everything, breakfast and excitement before it.
And did the children help in the preparation
Oh,
of the school?
yes, sure, it's half
Right.
that best part of your school.
Cleaning up. So the priest then obviously had a fair input into the school as well. Did they appear
Oh,
regularly,
yes.
or?
They appeared fairly regularly. And you know, confirmation was tremendous. Communal confirmation was, you do great preparation for those. You were examined by the priest with the communion. And for confirmation, of course, there was a bishop examination, which was very severe, because you had to have everything top to bottom, from the end of the Greek catechism to the next, and all the prayers and everything. And we had an awful lot of them in Irish, and the prayers weren't being in Irish school. And the bishop, as far as I remember, got up at the altar and went through every school in the parish and gave a verdict on how well informed and how well instructed the children were.
That must put terrible pressure on the
And
teachers and the pupils.
Teachers used to be raging, you know, because they never accepted it as a very objective thing, you know.
Right.
And you'd hear all the little gossip about it, you know, so sort of, he doesn't like so-and-so, you know, this school will be put in front of so-and-so.
And can you ever recall inspectors coming into the school?
Yes, we were terrified of the inspector coming. And as somebody said to me after, because the teachers got frightfully uptight and cross before the inspector's examinations, you know. And someone said after, if they could only tell us that it was they were being inspected and we'd break our hearts to do great for them, you know, instead of killing us and killing themselves. And then sort of blaming you if you gave the wrong answer the next day.
And did that actually happen where people would be, if you like, victimized the following day if you didn't
Oh, they'd
perform?
be given out to, they wouldn't be punished severely or anything, but you see, the teacher was let down, I suppose that's really what it felt like, you know. But oh my goodness, it was a very tense time when the inspectors came and were coming.
So it definitely wasn't positive for either pupil or teacher. It was,
I think it must have been dreadful for the teachers. You see, it was before the time, I think things went so bad for a while. It was a little bit, there was an awful lot of power left to those inspectors, wasn't there? I think that there was such a thing as a bonus or something.
That's right, they could
stop
stop
war
it.
or something, and they had to put a stop to that. You know. And we went way ahead with that, I suppose. And it was very hard.
When you were in primary school now, was there any stage that you felt, yeah, I'd like to be a teacher? Or did that come later?
I mean, for 5 minutes every 3 months or so.
Right.
But quite honestly, I was very free spirit, if you like. I didn't think an awful lot about what I would be when I was in primary school. And times, I suppose, were sort of tough in the country, you know. And it was the 30s, so, you know, things were poor. There was a lot of poverty. There was emigration as well, and to the States. But I never did, I don't ever remember thinking or ever making up my mind about a career when I was in any career when I was in primary school.
And then where did you go to secondary school?
And then I went to secondary school to a convent school. It was 6 miles from home. And that was a big deal as well, you know, because 6 miles away, no transport, unless you rode the old farm horse, so that you got an accident cart, or that you had a bicycle. Well, I had a bicycle.
So you cycled the 6 miles?
Yes, 6 miles, bad weather, good weather, and bad roads and everything.
That was difficult, wasn't it?
And that was tough, and we had 5.5-day week, 5 days and a half day on Saturday.
And what did you do Saturday morning? Was that academic subjects, or was this?
Academic subjects. And so what I went to the primary school until I was 14, let's say. And then there was 4 years preparation, 2 years to intercept, 2 years to intercept. That was it. And you took on your subjects, you know, and you hadn't learned, and you'd be so tired. Well, I never remember being particularly tired when I go to school, but I do remember the hunger. You'd be starving. And then you had a whole pile of homework to do. And they did it. That was also an Irish school. And we had the Irish and English and algebra and geometry and mathematics all in Irish, and geography in Irish, and history in Irish, and French in Irish, and Latin in Irish, and domestic science in Irish. I remember the teacher asking me when I was only maybe doing it a very short time, something about give her the recipe for the Strisheen Gael. And I hadn't a clue what it was, and I was looking at her, and I was considered to be quite well up in Irish, but we never had that woman to tell her for Irish stew. And she was just amazed that I didn't know what she was saying.
So it was obviously very
and
important.
I wasn't, you know, she thought it was something we would have at home every day, whereas we had stew, I suppose, but we never got it Irish stew, you know.
Right, yeah. Did your own name on it. Did you say that you left primary school at 14? Was that the norm at the time?
Well, for 13, 14, yes.
Right. And
13, you finished at 13 because you see, I suppose maybe that was because we were in the country and because of how the education system was set up, and you know, it cost money. You had to pay some fees that time to get your secondary education, and the nuns were very good, and they did all they could for families that couldn't afford it and that sort of thing. And you just worked hard at it, and there was no such thing as 3 years to prepare friends, and your first year's preparation was done in that 7th year or whatever you did in primary school.
Right. So you had a 7th class in primary school?
We did, yes.
Did you have an 8th as well?
Yes, but you know, how far can you go?
Right, yeah.
You know, that we did an awful lot in primary school, like this parsing and analysis and all sorts of Irish grammar and English grammar, you know, that we were very well versed in all those. When we went into secondary school, we were expected to be versed as well.
So the primary school more or less worked hand in glove with the secondary school.
Because a lot of people finished at 14.
Right.
And by God, they finished.
And did most people sit the primary cert then as well?
Yes, yes. The primary cert came in 6th class. I suppose we were about 12, you know.
And that was a huge
And
thing
that
as
was,
well.
oh yeah, you had more than the Irish. Put that down to Irish and English and maths. You know, what year, you know. They used to have or if they had something else. I honestly forget it. It's funny how nothing ever worried you. You just went on and did it. And that was it.
And were the results published of, like in secondary school, did they publish
Well,
the
in
results?
the 4 years, then 2 years to intercert, and every year in all the convents and the Christian brothers published in the county paper the results.
Oh, that was dreadful.
But they only said ons or pass. They didn't say how many ons
Right.
or how many passes. So you were either up in the ons list or in the pass list.
Right.
And the neighbours were very curious to know how you were doing.
I bet
And
they
the
were.
same for the leaving cert, you know.
Did most people just go, well, I won't say most, but anybody that went to secondary school, did they tend to stay to the leaving cert, or?
They tended to stay to leaving cert unless they got, well, some of them left as intercert and maybe went on to do typing in shorthand, you know. Now I left at, I went into the leaving cert and I left on the February of my leaving cert year because I was called to the civil service.
Right.
And who pass up that? Oh, they did go very hard on me. By the way, I was intended for teaching in there, you know, how they're preparing you. They were trying, they were great, you know, they did try to get careers or to face us into some kind of career, you know.
So
and they always had a number for the training colleges, you know, that for the training and for scholarships, and that they'd be tutoring you up for that, you know. But I was called to the civil service, and nothing went wrong with that. I was leaving, that was it. And I was very glad to be independent, to be able to earn something. And my parents, I think they listened to them, but they weren't, they were very annoyed. I know that the sisters were very annoyed that I left before my leaving cert. And, you know, would have written and asked them to hold the place for me. But I wouldn't let them do that. I thought it was utter waste not to do it. Throwing yourself away not looking at the job. The Reverend Mother said, you know, she gave me a lot of abuse about it.
Well, especially you were earmarked for teaching then at that stage as well, weren't you, if you were in the...
Yes, but I wasn't, I don't believe that I was ever mentally
ready at that stage.
ready or keen on teaching as a career at that time.
Right. And when you left on the February before you were due to sit your leaving cert?
But I do remember people asking me about it, you know, and I remember saying the only redeeming feature about it was that you could teach after you were married, whereas you had to give up on the other jobs at the civil service.
Right.
But that didn't last. I think there was a time when teachers had to retire as well, when they resigned, when they got married. Sorry, I wasn't listening to you there.
No, sorry, my own thought was gone there as well. Did you have a favourite subject then in secondary school?
I always loved Irish. I loved the music of Irish and the idiom of Irish, but possibly that was because we did so much of it in primary school.
Right.
And also sort of, there was a lot of folklore in our area, and that was one of the things we did in primary school, was a collection of folklore. Stories and customs and the bailiffs and all that went into school. It was transcribed into a big book, and sent, I think eventually this ended up somewhere in the archives in Dublin, you know. We used to go to the old people. They tell us stories in Irish and they tell us poems in Irish, and they would tell us customs and Pishore and everything, and some of them, their Irish was just oral Irish, you know, and it was impossible to write it down. We wrote it phonically and everything, and we bring it back to the teacher. He'd be able to sort of do something about making sense of it, you know.
So this was something you did say, like for a homework exercise?
Outside of extracurricular, I suppose you'd call it, really.
But it was under the direction of the teacher?
Oh, it was indeed, yes.
Right.
It.
And was there any particular teacher in secondary school that you admired?
don't remember that there was anyone in particular that in secondary school that I admired now. I mean, there were some that I liked better than others,
Right.
and that I thought were good teachers and that, but not one above another. And as well as that, I think there were a lot of them were sisters, nuns, and they had to be very aloof for the most part,
Was there any particular teacher that you really didn't like at all?
Well, I wouldn't say that I hated any of them, but I was afraid of some of the Reverend Mother, the one in charge, and that she had a frightful temper, and she would haul you up there, and she wouldn't take any excuse. You might get a slap across the face from her. She was a very bad temper woman.
Right.
We knew her well,
So
but it's funny when you're in a bunch in school, and that you are, she was frightful, and she treated people very badly, But it is marvellous support of peers that made a joke of it, made a joke of her, so that whoever it was that was the victim would never feel bad.
Right.
Wasn't there great psychology, which was instinctive in the peers?
So you'd say the atmosphere in the school was strict and fairly
very
rigid then?
strict and very, very full of work.
Right.
Very, very little room for any leisure at all,
That was frowned upon.
Well, it wasn't. I think there wasn't time for it. It was
Right.
very crammed.
Right.
It was very extremely worked very hard.
So when did you decide that you would like to actually teach? I'm interested.
Well, now my life didn't go into teaching at all really, because I went into the civil service, and I was in the civil service for 6 years, and I got married. I fell in love and got engaged and got married, and we lived for a while in the city. My husband was a civil servant also, and we moved to the country early 1960s. We had 3 children. We moved to the country, and we had one after we moved to the country. And he commuted, and he went to work every day. And at that stage, we had reason to having a car. And life in the country was wonderful, pioneering, and all sorts of unusual activities, living next door to the farmers and having pet lambs and marvellous with the children and everything. And then my husband died in 1971, and at that stage the eldest was 17, was in the Leaving Cert class, and the youngest was 6.
That's tough.
So that was tough, yes, and that was it was the end of 1971, so it was a very hard time after that, and had been considering before he died, because he was sick a year, and we used to chat about it, and I was saying, I used to say, no, I'd go back and do my leaving cert, I'd like to do a bit of study, something to engage my mind and that, but because we had the books and we had all the textbooks and everything in the house, and he wasn't well for about a year, but he died in 1971, and then I was really, I didn't even decide then to do anything. Maybe I wasn't capable of deciding, but I did have friends in Maynooth College, particularly one priest used to come to see my husband all the time. And he was chatting with me one day, and he said, I have to do something with you because you are going to get depressed or something, and I'm going to arrange for you to sit in at some lectures in Maynooth. You could go now, you could go as a mature student. if you want to do a degree but you don't want to do that. And I said, no, not really, you know. But I said, I don't know what I'll do because I'm going out of my mind, and I think, and he said, why not think about a degree or something, you know, for next October. And I said, maybe I would, you know, and then I did think about it. And then I said, I'll keep myself from going crazy, and I take some subjects, and the leaving cert, and I'll do them again, just to see if my brain is active enough to go back to that kind of thing. And it did. And I do Irish and English and history and economics and domestic science and I think accountancy or something. Didn't touch the maths.
Right.
And I did them. I got them all. I got, mind you, I was very pleased. I was doing my daughter doing her interest leaving cert at the same time. And then in October, he had arranged that I would go for an interview there and sort of apply for college. I said I won't ever finish it, but I'm starting, and I need the discipline of aiming at something, so I take first year arts.
Right.
And that's how I came to be having 3 years arts and qualifying, never deciding I was going to finish or anything, but taking each year as it came.
Right.
And then I decided, I decided this last year that I was doing arts that I would go in for teaching. And now that wasn't a vocational calling, I'd say, that was a career that I needed, but I knew I was going to be good at.
Right.
And with children anyway, because I had my own family and I knew what I felt about children and I liked them and all, you know. And
so you went to Pats then for the...
No, I was too old for Pats. They didn't take them. They didn't take older students, but they had a Fremen course for graduates out in the Dominican College in
Blackrock.
And I went for an interview there and they accepted me. Now at the same time I was toying with doing it. I didn't think I'd be able to make it into primary teaching, even though that would be my preference because of age. And I had also applied for doing the PhD.
Right.
Because I decided that might be so bad. I wasn't awfully keen on secondary teaching at all, but as it happens, God was good to me. I was called into the college, the Fremen College, and I did the year's course there.
Right.
Then I got my went teaching after that. And I had infant boys, junior infant boys for the first 2 years.
This is when you took up your full-time teaching position?
Full-time teaching.
Right.
Oh, teaching practice, you wanted to hear something about that?
Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. Go ahead with it.
48 junior infants.
48.
Yes, and I remember my priest friend in Maynooth used to come very often to see us indeed, and kept an eye on the family and was great friends and everything, you know. And he said, what is it like to be teaching? And I said, I have suffered 3 years for a BA and 1 year for a diploma. And I have tied 48 pairs of laces before the children come home every evening. And all the college training I've had for that.
So was this it was obviously a big city school, was it, that you first went to?
It wasn't a city school, it was out in Selbridge in the population growing, you see. And they had boys at that time up to first class.
So it was all boys in the class?
So they had boys' class and a girls' class.
Right. You didn't mix them?
It was, no. But it was because the girls' school.
Right.
They had took the boys up to the first community. And it was so crowded that I had that number of boys. But I wasn't, that was 1976. September 1976 it started. And they had them for 2, and I had another batch of them, 4 years, I suppose, the first 4 years that I was there. And the boys then, they could no longer take boys, they crowded out, you know.
And you were left with the boys for the 4 years?
Oh no, as a matter of fact, I took junior infants, and I took junior first year, and I took junior infants the second year.
But it was boys that you had
I
each
mean,
time?
I took the new reception class,
right.
But it was boys each time.
Was that through choice?
But then
or was
that was choice.
Right.
Well, it wasn't choice the first when I was going in there, you know, but I could have moved on to senior infants with the boys, with the first class, with that class. But I said no, I'd like to sort of have another go now with the reception class again, you know,
right.
so I can go up to the next one.
And did you get a lot of support from the other teachers there?
Yes.
Right.
For Marcus. And there was another, of course, there was another class of the same, you know, the junior infant class there, girls as well. And plenty of help. There were 9 teachers in the school really, and the principal was walking principal, you know, she at that time. She was she was great. Got plenty of support. And
so you
there was doing my diploma. There was always was so much too mature, I suppose, when the Kikra came in. Instead of impressing him, you know, I'd have oodles of questions to ask you, which was sheer torment. I know from them now, but really at that time I thought they would be able to tell me until I got the fellow that was his first year. He was a new inspector, you know.
Right.
And
you were able to tell him?
I wasn't. You see, I was in my innocence. I said, look, I want to find out this and this and this, you know. What stage should show so. What, now this is the first year, you know, what should I have, how many words should they have by this, and I was very serious, I was genuinely asking him, but the poor fellow was there reading notes in a book, he didn't know what to tell me, and I didn't realise it.
Right.
But anyway, he came a few times and he gave me my report, which was quite good for senior infants. And we had been examining junior infants all the time, so I decided, us kickers and us teachers, we're all the same, we don't know what we're doing. Had to write back in embarrassment to the school and ask the principal teacher to change it. We had put senior infants in his report.
You must have been absolutely mortified. Did you find inspectors in general that you could approach them, like obviously asking specific questions like you did? Would you feel that they were used to that, or it was more kind of teachers were in awe of them?
I don't think that they were. You see, that was the trouble with me going in a mature person.
Right.
You see, I didn't have and you can't do that. I didn't know that there was anything different in me.
Right.
But I mean, I was older than these inspectors, but that didn't occur to me either. You know, I thought this is a profession and this is a career and this is a job.
You wanted to know the answers.
And this is the team that's working in it.
Right.
And I honestly thought that was the relationship, you know. But from talking to people were quite amused when I told them, other teachers, you know, and sort of said, well, you know that it has sort of stayed as if they were examining you and you're supposed to know what you're doing. And I said, well, how do you know, sure, if you have these equations to ask, you know?
Right. Right.
So I think it was highly unusual.
Would you feel that, say, the time you retired, that it was very much the same situation as regards the relationship between teachers and inspectors, or
no, I wouldn't say
that changed?
Although I know that young people, you see, you are coming out of school and you have the few years in college, and you still aren't, you're still not as, well, let's say, assured of who you are and where you're going, and they are quite nervous. I mean, I've seen them over the years, you know, being quite uptight and nervous about the whole thing, but I think that the training of the inspectors has changed, because their attitude to them when they come in, they ease them, so they realise that, or maybe they've done some psychological study on it or something, but certainly it was cooperation. And then very soon, the young teachers very soon in later years now will see that, Well, maybe all inspectors were the same, but I know that there have been a few cases of corruptions in between of general inspections at schools, and teachers having to fight them and that sort of thing, to fight the attitudes.
Did you ever find yourself that you had to defend something you did in class, or?
No. I never found it, except only for that one time that when it came to, they knocked down the door at 2 o'clock to get their kids out, then,
Right.
Parents were becoming frightfully sophisticated at the time that I started teaching, and the patients wasn't there, and they wanted to be home, I suppose, and they had other things to do and that, so you must have them ready at 2 o'clock. Junior infants come out at 2 o'clock. 1:45, I said, I have to line them, I have to prepare them, because they had to be, 48. They had to be let go in bunches to get their coats, and then the next lot, and then the next lot, and then you were tying their laces and zipping up things. And he thought, he was doing that, and we had them ready. He thought that it was fine, it should be enough, I suppose, I didn't know. But when they were gone out anyway, and he said, "Phew, I thought that you'd have to do that to me. I never realised that you did."
All these things had to be done, yeah.
It was quite hectic.
And then, did you take on extra responsibilities within your school, or did
Yes. Well, then after I went into remedial teaching, because we got a slow teacher, as they used to call it. I was the slow teacher.
Right.
We got a remedial teacher in 1980, and I opted to go to that. I said, I think that I would like that, and give me plenty of experience of meet them coming from every class. So they said, yeah, have a bash and see what you do. And I stayed in that all the time until I retired.
So you had 4 years of class teaching.
That's all, yes.
And
then went into remedial teaching.
Obviously you liked the remedial teaching, you stayed in it.
I liked small groups. I liked the relationship with children.
Right.
And I did maths and English. And in a way it was a kind of conveyor belt, because the school became so big. We had 23 teachers, and I had the kids for maths and English. Maths 2 days a week, English 3 days, and they only got half an hour each.
So you obviously came across
each session, and that sort of thing. So it was a little bit spiky in that way, and it wasn't as satisfactory as it should be, in that you wouldn't give them enough time, but can you ever give them enough time? And look at all sorts. You get slow learners, you get people who have missed out, people who have changed from one school to another, or from one country to another. They're all very interesting, and people, the children that have been sick for a while, that sort of, and disturbed children. That really you're doing a little bit of social work with rather than acting.
And is there any particular child that stands out in your mind where you feel, yeah, I really did a great job with that child, or you could see some big improvement, or something that really strikes you and stays with you?
And there are a few of them, yes. I'll just say one. I remember one that was very soon after I started as well, and she was in 5th class. She couldn't read. She obviously couldn't read. So we had sessions. I had individual sessions with her, and once she never had learned any phonics or didn't know how to approach a word, you see, to look at
Right.
it in part from beginning to end or anything. And didn't she have a breakthrough in that, you know? And she was so timid, she was really put down, she was feeling very bad, obviously, you know, she had very low opinion of herself, you know, and I was saying, God, if I could build up this child's confidence or her esteem or something, you know. So I remember crossing up to the staff room one day, and she was coming into school, and she was so shy, she wouldn't talk to anyone. In fact, when she came to me first, it was 2 days before I could get a word out of her at all, you know. And I got a big wave from her and a high, you know. And she came in to me and she said, I don't need it.
She knew herself she'd made the breakthrough.
Well, now, and of course,
Right.
like she could, but things made sense to her eventually, just then, you know. And, you know, I used to be so sorry for her because she was so down. I used to tell the teacher things, I'd prepare something for her in her own reading, you know. And I tell her teacher, you see, you're to ask to read, because, you know, she was at that stage when they each one would read a bit out, you know, the classical passage, because she knew it by heart. It was very important to her that she
Wouldn't let herself down.
that she would shine in the class. And at that time, as well as that, she was feeling very sensitive because her immediate teacher was supposed to be for slow learners. You were adults.
Right.
It had got that awful reputation at the time when we took over. Then it became so common. People accepted it.
Right.
So it was a long time when mothers would not accept it, would not allow their children.
Collaboration between yourself and the classroom teachers.
Yes.
Did you work hand in hand,
Yes.
and you felt that they could help you and you could help them?
That's right, yes. Now, you see, there was a lot of collaboration. At the same time, we tried to make it different, you know, and we always understood that that my program wouldn't be their readers or whatever they're doing in the classroom, but basically we had the same things, you know, or my maths would not at all be for anything that any workbooks that they were using or anything, or any methods like that, you know. And remedial is most important. Remedial in English is in the early years, frankly, you know, and it was very easy to keep them away from their classroom program, you see, because what were you giving them with the sight words and teaching them the little plans of the letter sounds and all this sort of thing, and then building them up from there to phonics, reading and spelling and sort of rhyming and all this sort of thing, you know.
Right.
And of course there are slow learners that will take a long time, you know, to repeat. So remedial teaching is, you could say that it is very monotonous if the child wasn't the important thing in it, you know.
Right.
And such small little progress. And satisfaction is the achievement that they don't get in the classroom, because it's always 5 or 6 or 18 miles ahead of them. But to feel that they did it themselves and they were clever, you know, and they come back complaining to me, you know, that everyone shouts and they won't give me time to make out the word.
It's an important point, isn't it, really?
It is. I mean, their little time in the remedial class was a big deal, because they were important, they were achieving. Which they can't do with 40 children, because someone is bound to scream out the word and won't, and who has time to wait.
Was there any piece of advice that you can remember in your initial years of teaching that stood the test of time with you felt, or that you found yourself coming back to again and again?
Yes, unfortunately. I learned the hard way the most boring and dreary part of teaching: consolidation.
Right.
Time and time again I have learned, found, and been shocked that it doesn't stick.
Right.
And that's that's quite shocking for a long time. It does not stay with a lot of previous things that you know, think that they know very, very, very well. And somebody had said, that the most important part of your teaching, they had said to me sometime early on, maybe that it was in college or something, and it's very hard to realise it, but that the repetition and different, even if you have to change different ways of doing it, but it is very hard consolidation, and it's very boring.
And would you say that's more true for slower children than for the brighter ones, or for all?
Very much for the slower children. Of course, you see all my experiences with them. A lot of my experiences with the slower ones. But even with that, I would hear, when somebody else gave me in the secondary school, I was saying, what? I'm a remedial teacher, what should I do? What do you want every child to know going in? And he said, for heaven's sake, have them adding and subtracting and multiplying if you can, but adding and subtracting. And kind of tables as much as you can. And then I did. When the teachers always, I had to keep up with their classwork. I had to give them extra what they were doing for their maths topics in class, of course, to keep them going with it. But we always did tables, and we always did subtraction, and they used to be delighted in third class, let's say, because the same thing as I've just said before, second class coming up, and they would do subtraction. And they would say, we were best, because the others would have forgotten.
Right. It's a great
and
boost,
they wouldn't have forgotten, but we'd been doing it maybe for the week before or something, and they were ready. Should they have forgotten again in 6 months? You have to keep going back and repeating.
It was their moment of triumph. And can you remember yourself giving any younger teacher a piece of advice?
I don't know. I suppose I gave younger teachers lots of advice, but I don't ever remember sitting down and giving young teachers advice.
If you were to give a young teacher now starting off, what piece of advice would you give them?
Gosh, that's a very profound question, And certainly would be inclined to say the very first, which I often did, whatever happens in the classroom, don't let it panic you. Particularly when they're taking infants, because it's awfully frightening. The little infants, they're running around, they don't hear you or see you or anything. There's 47, 45 or 43 or 40 of them, and I've seen teachers come in shock.
Right.
At 11 o'clock, in total shock. They don't hear them. They wouldn't do anything you'd ask them. I always remember Sister Mary one day, she had great sense of humour, and she got junior infants, and I happened to go into her in the morning, because I hadn't remedial, I was sorting things out. And they were wild, and all sorts of everything they had to play with was out and everything, and she was there, and she said, I'm observing.
So she kept her
cool. Was there, and there was one, she said, I don't know that one there, she said, she's mad. You see, child, she was half mad. She never settled down at school.
So she identified her very quickly. Right.
And then she went upstairs to see some little things, cute, quaint little things of what they're trying to be doing, And she said, gosh,
So you think a sense of humour is important?
Well, it's important, and sort of that, because she had experience now, and she was observing.
Right.
And she knew for after the hour in the morning, I said, she was a fair deal about her crowd, you know.
Right. And did you find that as a staff that you did share good?
Oh, we were very far in the school that I was, and even one of the kickers said that to me when we were chatting, you know, and I was saying about various things, you know, and whatever, I don't know how it came up, but he said, you don't realise, he said, because you haven't taught anywhere else, the private history schools all the time, he said, you've an exceptional relationship in the staff room here. Right. So, you know, things can go right or things can go wrong, and I was very fortunate in that we had always, even when we had 23 teachers, there was no division within that group. Right. We were all chatting equally with each other, and there were no little cliques formed, and there was no, I don't know how they ever managed to keep them without too many cribs or anything, you know, or resentment to each other, or jealousies, or fights, or anything like that.
Do you think it had, obviously it had something to do with leadership?
Oh, yeah, the principal, yes. Yeah. And it became, you know, it became a matter of pride nearly, I'd say, with the principal in the end, you know. And we didn't have the same principal all the time, right, because it was a sister school and they changed every 3 years or 6 years.
Oh, right.
6 years was the longest.
Was there any particular member of staff that you admired, you know, as regards, you know, what they were doing and the way they approached teaching, or?
You know, I think they were all excellent.
Really? You each had something to contribute.
Oh gosh, I think yes. But you know why? As well as that, there was great. Teachers helped each other.
Right.
And there was no. There didn't seem to be any rivalry at all. If you were good at something, you know, of course they were all women, and it was a girls' school, and they would say, "Oh gosh, I know you're good at this. Will you?" And they'd make a date. I'll come into you and so, and I'll swap with you for so and so and so and so, you know.
Right. And
all this sort of thing. They're not getting it. You know, you'd hear a teacher say, "They're not getting it. Can't be." And very often a teacher would come to me and say, "They're not getting it." So when you teach them that, can't be their fault. It must be my fault now. How will I must start this again? Whatever little maths thing or whatever to be presented in a different way. You know?
So it was a very open
atmosphere. It was so open. Nobody was ashamed to go to anyone else.
Right.
And building a great picture. But honestly, that's what I saw when I was in remedial, and I saw all the teachers.
Right.
And I knew what they were like, you know. And so maybe some of them, of course, had better skills than others.
Yes, yeah.
And some of them were better teachers for some reason than others. Is it you?
Yes.
But, you know, there wasn't any bitchings.
Right.
Isn't that strange? I don't think that there is a school like, from listening to teachers out of other schools. That isn't. I think it's unusual.
Well, it's unusual, I think, to have that level of cooperation, because it was, as you said, quite a big staff. And for people to feel free, you know, to be able to kind of literally go to anybody on the staff.
I remember there was a teacher, and she had four very, very bad, very, very bored class. You know. You'd help with those two, and that was policy of the school. Whoever was on yard duty or whatever else, every teacher had the same authority over every class to reprimand them, except during class hours. You know, and there was a teacher who took it very badly, but that I complained that she was rude at the school. I complained and said, "You're going to, I'm letting you know now, I was on yard duty, you're going to have trouble there. If you don't, we have to pull them up." She was insulted because I reprimanded her class, see. So we took it, I said, "Listen, that in the house stands at all, you know. We had a little chat about it, and we did have a little chat about it to the principal. She talked to the two of us, you know, if you like, you know, and sort of said, no, don't present anything like that. It's the wrong attitude. It isn't your fault, you know. It is, we know the children, we got them this year and that. Pacified it. You see, it could blow, you know.
Yeah. The teacher took exception to the fact that you said.
But then I reprimanded them.
Right.
I was on duty, and it was a wet day, and they were in the classroom.
Right. She took this nearly as a reflection on
Right,
of her discipline.
on hers.
Yeah, right.
And sort of, that's where I felt bad. They complained. I said, when your teacher comes back, will you please tell her what you've been doing and why you're standing there, you know? I want to hear a report about that, you know.
Right.
So, of course, they told their own story. And she wasn't mature enough at that stage. She took it, I was criticizing her maybe indirectly, you know. That was her first year in school.
What she learned.
In a nice kind of way.
Yeah,
We never had any.
Yeah.
Because I remember there was one teacher that had a breakdown there in the 6th class. And she was a lovely teacher. But that's what happened to her really. I think that she didn't confide in someone, you know, she was having a very hard time. And everyone knew that they were going to pop this again with them in that class, you know. And she wasn't able to handle it in the end, you know. But we did say to her, you know, the year before, I remember when someone said to her, you know, you have a tough crowd there, you're going to the heart, you know. And she said, do you think so? And someone else said yes. And she didn't. I don't know, I suppose maybe there was some leanness in herself. She broke down before the end of the year. Turned out so.
That's unfortunate, wasn't it?
As a matter of fact, she left teaching.
Really? Did you?
So I think, you know, we all felt very bad about it when that's the conclusion we came to, you know, that she didn't confide, that she wasn't able to somehow or another sort of, because honestly, often I said to them, oh God, we should have, listen, you should have a tape recorder. There's the best comedy and the best book you ever read in this place, because you go into the staff room in the evening and you had got rid of them all. I never had anything like it.
Stories.
Letting off steam. Oh my goodness.
It's great though that the staff felt free to do it.
Letting off steam, you know. I'll be dog out of Mrs. So-and-so.
Right.
And the language always be hilarious.
Well, it's one way of coping with
Then
it.
there was the parent that told, that said to one of the teachers, you know, and her degree was in maths, you know, and she had, I suppose, she was a small figure. And, you know, he was being taught by a man, one of these professionals, engineer or something, quite full of himself about maths, and said, her maths, the daughter's maths weren't so good, you know, but then the women are never any good at maths. And she says, and she had to look up like that, and, you know, I beg your pardon, my degree's in maths. What complaint have you?
Kind of wiped it out.
She came in that evening. Oh, she was furious. But I was trying to make little of me. Issue with that on.
Yeah.
He needs a good year. She was totally. And we said, oh my God, you're very mad.
Right.
Wasn't it great to be able to?
Marvellous, because as I said, it doesn't happen
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Oh gosh, no, we couldn't possibly. And there's a little bit of rivalry with bitchiness and everything. But we were very fortunate, and I hope the school will always be like that.
Be nice to think it would.
Yeah.
Did you notice a difference, say, in the behaviour of children, if you like, or just the whole setup with children from when you started teaching to when you retired? Can you just speak a little bit about that?
You see, they were the no slapping had just come in. What year? The 70s, early 70s, wasn't it?
I think it actually might have been later.
Yes, maybe it was later in the
Later,
70s. But around that, was it?
I think it was, yeah.
Yes, because even in when I started, you see, well, they were certainly weren't slapping in our school, you know. There's no such thing as that kind of punishment, you know. But indeed, you could you'd have to physically restrain these young little fellows, you know, that had no control, throwing tantrums and everything. Yet, just hold on to them when they'd be going to keep the daylights out and everything. For the first days of school, throwing the tantrums. But you know, it became very, very noticeable. The children would say, "You can't touch me."
They would actually say that to you.
Oh, yeah, it became very cheeky in it. We heard, and you know, then of course there was so much of a build up about the whole discipline, school discipline thing, and the slapping, and it was discussed on radio, and we never heard that when we were in school. Well, I know it because people used to tell me, because I was saying, you know, where are children? Why are children getting all this information, saying what teachers can and can't do and what they can do, you know? Because you always have cheeky little children who tell me that. And the people tell me, well, you know, they were raining day born and the praying. That's they very soon began to test their powers. I think that really that happened. It's sort of tantalizing, we began to make stories. And it's in our school, it happened a few times, you know, that indeed teachers were embarrassed because they were home and told a big story. She pushed me, she pulled my hair, and things like that. How do you defend yourself, you see?
Right.
Parents came in, charging the teacher.
How did the
Principal always stood up there, always had an interview with the teacher. We made it, well, maybe not, but if things were looking to be troublesome, they would always call in the principal. The teacher would sort of say so-and-so, make a date, form a date, you see, and even have the child there, you know, after the interview. The child would tell the parents exactly she wanted to, and said she did push me. She did pull. She's picking on me.
difficult one?
All the time. Trying to talk the mother into being sensible, you know, but teachers were distressed a few times, really upset, you know.
And did that sort itself out over the years, or?
There was always the odd case. They would say a teacher was picking on her, and the teacher was exactly what it, you know. Which makes things very distressful for a teacher, because, you know, how can you prove it? Maybe the mother would believe that, or the father, or whatever it would be. But nothing major came up out of it, only discipline did become harder in the school, I think. The children, I didn't notice that there was anything different that could be done with them. The children got bolder because they knew they were going to get away with it, or that nobody could touch them. That someone said, don't we all, isn't our discipline in society the result of fear? I said, good Lord. And he said, no, look around you. He said, no, why don't you respect the speeding? Because you'll be fine.
Right.
All these things we do. There are sanctions that will stop you.
And do you feel that the sanctions that schools may have at the moment are not working as well, maybe as...
Well, I suppose for very serious offences that they would work. But look at all the stress that teachers have in between those times. And most of the offences are just
petty.
cheat and non-compliance with your orders or whatever, you know. Things that are very, very stressful and frustrating for the teachers, but you can live above them. If the child doesn't want, if the child won't do what she's told, if the child won't.
Right.
You'll find them the same thing too. But they're getting cheekier.
I suppose I wasn't long enough teaching really to, I think within the
Or
first
to
2 years
compare.
to compare. And I
think
think
you
there's
were.
an awful lot of
Have they become any worse since you started, no?
I think they have as regards kind of petty, just deviant behaviour, trying it on, this kind of thing, which can, unless you adopt a very workable system, can just actually waste an awful lot of time and effort.
That's right, yes, you have to have it very streamlined. That's what happened to, they had that kind of, we made out an out school to home thing, list of little plies, you know, to keep your class working.
And did you notice a difference in parents from when you first started to teach?
I think there was always a variety of parents.
Right.
And I don't think that they changed. You know, the parents like that, the very indulgent children I did find in later years, but then maybe that's because I met all the same kind of parents, maybe because of the kind of children that I had, you know.
Right.
They indulged their children a lot. But I couldn't, that's a very, very one-sided kind of opinion to have. I couldn't give an objective one really, because I had such a narrow section really, I suppose you could say.
Right. Did you ever feel that any child in your school was victimized in any way?
By the teachers?
Well, by teachers, by principal, by maybe even by
I
the
never
pupils.
saw a child being victimized. I think that really we had very professional people in school. I never saw pettiness in our teachers.
Right.
And I never saw a child victimized. The school was too big maybe for that as well. You would see signs of, you would be sorry for children, you could see if the children were neglected or abused or something at home or that. You would see that yourself, wouldn't you?
Just we'll wrap up now, Anne. Were you happy to retire, or had you reached the point of being cynical at that stage, or did you just feel right?
No, I wasn't ever cynical, and I wasn't stay. I would say maybe my career was too short.
Right.
I was awfully tired. I found it a great strain because, I suppose because I was older, and because it's very intensive, and you think that remedial teaching is not intensive, but still you go about it conscientiously, and you're doing your damnedest to stimulate and to bring in all sorts of variety and to somehow or another get something clicked with the pupils, you know. I mean, you must achieve in some way. I found it very tiring in the last years. And that's because I was older, I suppose.
When exactly did you retire?
1994.
Right. And your colleagues who retired in your time there, were they happy to go?
Yes, everyone who reaches the age of retirement, and some of them can hardly, you know, are dying to be 60 years of age, to have their years in.
Right.
For full retirement. Of course, I wasn't teaching that long, so full age to retire.
And if you look back on your teaching career, what would be the most memorable aspects of it for you?
The Christmas holidays.
Well, we can all identify with that.
The day of the Christmas holidays with the junior infants.
Right.
Most memorable aspects. Could you put that question to me again?
Just if we were to look back on your teaching career, what did you enjoy most about it? Was it, obviously you had a very strong relationship with the staff. Was it the rapport that you had there? Was it the feeling of achievement like you had with that particular child when she learned how to read?
I think that it was the interaction with the young minds, with the children's minds.
Right.
And also I did appreciate and very much like interaction with teachers. But I think most enjoyable part of teaching is that sort of interaction with young, such a variety of young minds, you know.
Right. Yeah. And what did you find that you least enjoyed?
Oh,
right. Again, we can all identify with that one.
What I least enjoy about teaching. I hate about teaching. I don't know what I hated about it.
It probably was yard duty. So.
I know that I hated the days of yard duty.
Right.
I hated that part of it, you know.
Do you think that you were fulfilled in teaching?
Yes. Yes, I've got great satisfaction out of teaching. When I say I was fulfilled, I do believe that you need something outside of teaching or to be very, very, very stressful. You know, you need something to pull you out of it, outside of school. Totally different.
Right. Did you see any major changes in, say, working conditions from the time you started to when you left? Class size, for instance, salary?
Yes, I saw major changes in the equipment available for schools.
Right.
From the time that I made them myself the first year for the 48 boys. What a shock. You had to make little things for them for counting and matching cards and all these pictures and words matching and everything. And it became so that we could buy them in boxes and throw them away when they got dirty and get other ones. You got far better, well, maybe the parents contributed too, but we certainly got better allowances for teaching in the classroom.
And
that was the most major, and of course the computers came in, and I had a computer in remedial teaching, and they could be learning their little key skills from the older ones and that sort of thing. You know?
So you actually...
And you had, that's again the same thing. Sort of you could put up on the screen things for them that you were hanging up on the wall before or whatever, you know.
So you saw a change in teaching methods as well?
Of course, that was the change in teaching method, was because you could use a screen.
And well, we spoke a bit about relationships with children, that you did feel that there was a change there. And the final question, Anne, is would you recommend anybody who was interested in going for teaching, would you say to them, go for it? Or...
Oh, yes. Very satisfactory career. If you have the right disposition.
What do you think the right disposition is?
Oh, plenty, an awful lot of patience. And if you are highly strung, I think, and sort of very sensitive, very highly strung, kind of panic and to get overwrought quickly, it's going to be very testing for you, and I don't think that anyone like that maybe would consider it in the first place, because they know instinctively that this thing will drive them crazy.
What do you think makes a good teacher? you mentioned at one stage there that you felt that there were some good teachers in secondary school. In your opinion,
certainly not the brightest. I think the brainiest people can never come down to a very plain language to explain or to get across knowledge to you, you know. So what makes a good teacher? I suppose I don't know how you describe that, but I would imagine that it is somebody from talking to teachers and saying, I'd be sort of summarising in my mind and saying, that's it, you must be a damn fine teacher in that subject, you know. And I think it's maybe understanding, isn't it, the psychology of children, of a child's mind. I also think that kind of, you know, you sometimes feel very mature and you have to go back in wonderment to their stage of life to get hold of their imagination. But what quality is that? Could be dotage.
I don't think so. Thanks very much for that interview.